welcome to another episode of Home Sweet Home. My name is Rod McCall.
And I'm Scott Nicholas.
Man, I tell you what, I think summertime is becoming my favorite time of the year.
Summertime.
And it's not just the lemonade.
Yeah.
I like the slower pace that my life has in the summertime. Now, I've been watching some YouTube videos and some Facebook reels, and they're talking about teachers and the idea that, well, teachers have it made in the shade. They get all this free time. They get summers off. They get, 2 weeks at Christmas, and you get, spring break. Like, holy cow.
We've been out for like 4 weeks, and last week, this was the only week so far that I've had to myself. And my next week is actually full of professional development, so that I don't get paid for.
And yes, that was what was being brought up, is that the stress, the frustration, that the life of a school teacher, especially by people who are not professional educators, they look at it and they go, "Oh, that's such a gravy job."
Yeah.
And my response, and based on it was also the comments made by these people that are doing these video things, was, if it's so easy, then why the hell aren't you doing it?
Right.
Come and spend a day, a week, quit your job, and come join us.
Right.
But
well, there's the call to action. Right?
Yes.
We probably won't see much come from that.
Right.
And that's fine. Right? I mean, if you're not called to it, don't do it.
Oh, fair enough. We worked with people that do not deserve to be teachers. But anyway, so I got a fast question for you. Did you ever read the book 1984?
Of course.
Okay. I don't remember having to read it in school, but I read it anyway.
Right.
And I think they even made a movie about it in, oh, crying out loud, I don't know, I want to say the early 80s. I don't know that for a fact.
Okay.
I like the movie Will Smith was in, him and Gene Hackman, Enemy of the State, where they monitor literally every aspect of our lives. I think I saw somewhere that New York City has more closed circuit TV cameras than anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
I mean, I saw, what was it, Fast and Furious, one of the Fast and Furious movies, where somebody had made a device that would, you put in somebody's name or their image, and it would search literally cell phones, laptops, bank cameras, as well as any security cameras, looking for footage of that person's face.
Right.
And I'm reminded of stuff that, well, how shall we say this? We have a right to privacy. I mean, it's kind of included in the Ninth Amendment.
Sure.
And the Supreme Court has ruled that we can expect to have a certain level of privacy. We have the Fourth Amendment that protects us against illegal search and seizure. But are we willingly giving up our right to privacy in the name of safety and security?
Maybe. I'm not quite sure where we're headed, so. I mean, the right to privacy, constitutionally, those things are a relationship between the government and you, right? So you have a right to privacy from the government. You don't necessarily have the right to privacy from everybody else, but
okay,
not in absolutely everything. Right?
Okay,
but enough. We do have, right? You go to a doctor's office and you sign a HIPAA agreement, right?
Right.
And there's students, like, we don't share grades, and that kind of personal information. But we're government employees. The healthcare, some of it's government paid, so that kind of applies. There's those things. Certainly, when I jump on Facebook, because I'm old, right?
We're watching television.
I mean, to be fair, I have all the other ones except TikTok.
Yeah.
But I just don't use them. So, but if I go onto Instagram or Facebook or X or whatever, right, and I post stuff, I think I can reasonably expect that I have lost my privacy.
Okay.
Right? That I've given it up.
Okay.
I don't know that I've given it up for safety.
Okay.
I've given it up willy-nilly.
Okay.
To some extent, especially if I'm posting my kids. I mean, I think about cars driving around and saying, my kid is an honor student at such and such a school, and then they have a tag hanging from their mirror in their car that has a number on it and a school, and that's for a pickup line, and it's like, so, I mean, there's lots of information in that yes. I think is dangerous.
I completely agree. Our grocery store card,
sure.
Whether it's a Kroger's card or, whatever your grocery store chain you are, you scan it to get the discount so that you don't have to pay the overpriced stuff, but yet they're tracking.
Right.
And so that brought me to an interesting deal. See, my wife, her sister, her brother, all have that Life 360 on their phone.
Okay.
And they track each other. My stepdaughter has it on her phone, and they're all synced to each other, so they always know where each other is at any given moment.
Okay.
Sherry had to go into the office yesterday, and she didn't bother calling home or calling me saying, "Hey, I'm on my way home. I'll see you in a little bit." Her sister was able to relay that information because of Life 360.
Wow.
And it's kind of like, that's kind of my first thought was, wow. So
I have no idea what Life 360 is, but I do know on Apple phones there's that location services.
Yes.
And there you can turn on so that certain friends can
yes.
see where you are.
Well, this is similar to that. It's just an app you download, you program in the different phone numbers, and it just tracks.
For instance, I was at a mall yesterday.
Okay.
And my youngest daughter texted me something, and then her next text, one right after the other, said, "Oh, you're at such and such a mall." And I'm like, "Yeah." But I forgot that I had shared my location with her. She shares hers with me, right? I mean, hers is shared with me mostly because if she goes out on a date, she wants me to know where she is.
Oh, okay.
Right? It's not like I'm looking at it. But when you in an Apple phone, an iPhone, when you text somebody, that information actually shows up under their name at the top of the screen. It says where they are at the moment. So it'll say, Dallas, Texas, or whatever city you're in, right there. And then if you click on it, it'll actually give you a map of exactly where you are in that place.
I'll be buggered.
If you've shared your information. Now, presumably that's not available if you haven't specifically shared it with that person, which I assume Life 360 works similar.
I think so, maybe. I don't know. I don't have it on my phone.
Now, my guess is if the government wants to know where I am, they can find that out no matter what.
Well, that's true, because you got all kinds of stuff on your phone that tells, lets them track you, GPS, this, that, and the other. So I say all that because I'm wondering, because a lot of my students have this on their phones, and my nephew, who is going to be a junior in high school, he has it on his phone, but it's these trackers that these kinds of cell phone additions that allow parents to track their children.
Sure.
And the question is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Yes, we'll just start with that question. Should you, as a parent, be tracking the whereabouts of your children 24/7?
So I think a lot of that comes down for me to motivation. Why am I tracking my kid? Am I tracking them because I want to absolutely control their life?
Mm-hmm.
Right, which could lead towards abusive situations? Or am I tracking them because I'm concerned about activity, their safety? For instance, my daughter, right? I mean, she's an adult. I don't need to track her. She can do what she wants, right? She's not even under 18, right? So mid-20s, she wants to go on a date. That's great, but dates can be dangerous, right? I mean, there's
More
all
dangerous
kinds of
today than they were
there's all kinds of
20,
human
30 years ago?
trafficking and all kinds of things taking place, right? So she wants me
Okay.
to know where she is. So, that's voluntary for her. But yeah, from a kid's standpoint, right? Like, I mean, if I'm concerned about my kid being involved with the wrong group or something, then maybe I do want to track them so that I'm seeing kind of where they are.
So
if I find that they're down on the wrong street in Dallas, Texas, I might need to have a talk with them, or maybe I need to go get them.
well, how about this though? Would you have wanted your mom or dad to have tracked your every movement when you were a young person?
Of course not.
Whoa. So here's the thing. If you didn't want it for you, why do you want it for your children? Especially
I mean, I
a minor child.
I didn't want a bedtime either, but I gave it to my kids, despite the fact that when I was a kid, I didn't want a bedtime.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we do what we think is best for our children.
Okay.
So I think that's part of that. But again, I think your motivation for doing it, like, is it just because you don't trust your kid and you want to come down on them and you want to control their every move? Or does it have to do with safety? I mean, do I want to track where my third grade student is if they have a cell phone? Yes, I do. Right. I mean, if they're 10 years old, I want to know where they are.
Okay.
Right. Because if I let them go to some kid's house, another kid's house for the night, and then suddenly they're not there and they're down 30 miles away at another place, well, that's a concern for me. Right.
Uh-huh.
So, probably wouldn't put my kid in that situation to begin with, but you never know. Right?
Gotcha.
What's going to happen? So, I think there are reasonable reasons to use it, but I also think that there's overprotectiveness, right? Like in the education world, we talk about helicopter parents, right? I mean, you can be a little bit overdone with these kinds of things, and that creates a tension in relationship that you being a counselor, right? You probably end up having either the parents or the kid in some counseling
Sure.
at a later point in life.
Sure.
But I think that the younger they are, the more likely it is that you want to know where they are.
So,
and the older they get, you want to release that a little bit.
And that's kind of what I was trying to get to. I get that when you are a little kid. But I think back to when, we were growing up, my mom would always say, go out and play.
Yeah.
And we would play with the neighbor kids, and we would be in a couple of block radius. Or kids from our street and one street over. And so we would be playing, and we would say, hey, I'm going over to Johnny's house. And so you would go up to Johnny's house, and mom would assume that that's where you're at. Now, we would say, hey, we're going to go ride bikes.
Okay.
Well, okay, now we're riding bikes, and that could put us anywhere in a 5 to 10 mile radius.
Sure.
Probably up by the Quickie Mart, where we would, spend money, our allowance money on candy and soda and other crap we shouldn't have.
You got an allowance? Man, you were rich.
Well, you should have seen that chore list. Okay.
Okay, so you earned it. All right.
Yeah. But we did what I would say was a lot of things that maybe I would not have wanted my parents to know. At least not
absolutely.
when I was, 10 years old, 12 years old, something like that. And so the idea of being tracked, being 14, being 16 years old, being tracked everywhere I go, my question comes down to this, and this is kind of where you were saying too, is what is the line between safety and independence? Because as a child gets older, you want them to not be tied to your apron strings. You want them to go and explore, to go out and push the boundaries of, and develop some independence. Make mistakes, learn from their mistakes. But can they do that? Can they feel the freedom to kind of go out and do some of the crazy crap that we would do, ride bikes, maybe go further outside the boundaries than we were supposed to, go hang out with, different people than beyond what we originally said, without fear of reprisal. I guess I'm trying to figure out, where is that line of protective and overprotective? You want that kid to develop some independence, to learn to make mistakes and correct on their own those mistakes that they made.
Sure.
But how can they do that if they feel that Big Brother is watching every single thing that they do, every movement that they make?
Well,
are you stifling their ability to become independent?
Sure. So I guess, as you say all those things, my thought is trust, right?
Okay.
Has there been some trust built?
Okay.
And where is the respect level, both from the parent and the child, right?
Okay.
In that case, I think you get to a point. With my own kids, did my kids do some stupid things? Some of them did, some of them didn't.
Okay.
Right. And the ones who did will admit it. They know.
Yeah.
They know what they did. They told me years later. Right. Yeah. I already knew what they were doing.
Okay.
But it just all depends. And then, are they in a safe environment when whatever they're doing that's stupid is
Uh-huh.
Are they in a safe place? Some of the stupid things that have been done by my kids were done at other people's houses, right?
Yeah.
Where the parents were actually there.
Yeah.
So who am I upset with, the kid or the parent? Probably the parent, right? But at least they were safe.
Okay.
When they were doing it. So I think there's got to be a trust level. You have to get kids making good decisions, and you can't just come down on them for not making a good decision, right? It needs to be a teachable moment of, was that a good idea?
Okay.
We talked in a previous episode about your frontal cortex and all that decision making and stuff, right? You can't really expect somebody who's under 25 to be making all the best decisions, right? That's
true.
I don't remember me making all the best decisions under 25.
I still don't.
So it's a matter of teaching them to try to make the best decision at the time, right?
Right.
With what they have, and consider their safety and other people's safety, and all those things. Is it complicated? 100%. Right. When I was a kid, I left early in the morning like you did, and I went out and did some of the dumbest crap ever, and probably should be dead.
Oh yeah.
Given some of the things that I did.
Yeah.
And luckily I'm not, right? But I think that even my wife, I tell her some stories. She's like, "How are you still alive?" And I don't know, right? I guess grace of God, whatever.
Yeah,
but it's just, I think that there's some kind of a fine line, and I think it depends on your relationship with the child and kind of your parenting style, and whether you feel like you're pushing it over the limit or not. And I don't know where that limit is for everybody, because I think that some students some kids make some really bad decisions repetitively.
Yeah.
They don't learn from it. If I was that parent, do I need to watch them more? Absolutely. My youngest daughter, I took her phone away for weeks. I would do all kinds of stuff to try to make sure that she wasn't doing those bad things over and over and over.
Sure.
And what happened when I gave it back? She did the same thing, right? Fortunately, we lived in a small town. I knew exactly where she was doing. I didn't need a tracker. There was only one place to do those things.
Okay.
So, but it's just, it's not easy. And it's heartbreaking as a parent to have your kid doing something that is harmful, and then to know they're doing it, but not know where they're doing it, or not know where they're having that every time that's tough. That is really, really tough. And so I think as a parent, to be able to track, I feel a little bit better, especially if they don't go somewhere they're not supposed to.
Okay.
Because then, am I only going back to the kid when they go somewhere they're not supposed to?
Okay.
Or is it when I do see that they've gone somewhere they were supposed to and they did the right thing, am I kind of reinforcing that?
Well, I'd stumbled across an article by a mother whose kid was going off to college. And she was having this very same kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Of, do I track my kid or not? And her argument had been, for the most part, of not. That she could, but she was going, look, I grew up and I had to learn how to make these kinds of decisions to have that freedom. And she felt that her job as a parent was to, and I'm going to quote here exactly, that she was to be a safety net, not a SWAT helicopter.
Sure.
And I kind of agree with that. So I don't know. I
see now. I feel like if they're over if they're 18 or older,
yeah.
and out of high school, then it's not my job to monitor that.
Yes.
Am I going to still be concerned about where they are? Sure, right. You can't ever stop being a parent.
True.
However, I'm not tracking them unless they permit me to.
Well,
right, and so my daughter permits me to. My other kids, I don't track.
Yeah.
I don't have anything on them, and I say I track my youngest, but she doesn't. I don't actually look.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, when I text her, it comes up and says where she is, but it's really of no concern to me.
Well, here's where I think you and I are similar in this. My stepdaughter has her with my wife, and they share locations, and she's 28 years old.
Yeah.
But where I agree with you is if you've got a little kid, again, I've got a nephew that is 16 and for the most part makes good decisions, but he's 16.
Sure.
And so the chances of him making a not so wise decision are pretty darn good. But what got me was in this lady's article, she was saying that 36, and this came out in March of this year, okay, March of 2024. And she was saying, I didn't double check her research, but she was saying 36% of college kid parents track their children's movements.
I can imagine that.
And I'm kind of going with you. Look, part of growing up is sometimes you got to make these dumb decisions. Sometimes you got to have these mistakes that kick you in the butt, because the more they kick you in the butt, I got to say, the better the lesson learned.
Yeah, I mean, the reason to go off to college and not stay home for college is to grow up.
Yes.
And the big part of growing up is making stupid mistakes.
Yes.
Right. I mean, think about this. I don't know what the statistics are. I've talked to lots of people with college degrees because, that's mostly who I work with.
True.
But, and they'll all typically say, yeah, I failed a course in college, right? And it's almost invariably in their freshman year, right?
Yeah.
And why do people fail courses in their freshman year? Because they're doing stupid stuff.
Uh-huh.
And they miss class because they did stupid stuff the night before, and whatever, right? But then you got to learn from that, right? I mean, learning comes through failing. And if you're never allowed to fail, how are you going to learn?
Exactly. And that's why I question just how much of a police state do you have on your kid. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. When they're little kids, they have no freedom.
Yeah.
And when you get to middle school, we're going to give you a little bit to see how well you handle it. And by the time you get to high school, we're going to give you a lot more. And as you go through high school, we're going to give you more to see how you handle it. We're going to give you opportunities to develop the trust. I know my parents did that for my sisters and I. And while I didn't really pay attention to my sisters, I do know for me, it was wonderful. And did I make dumb mistakes? Did I try and get stuff over on my parents? Heck, yes.
Of course.
Sometimes I was successful. Sometimes I was not. I was never nearly as clever as I thought I was. But it was, my parents would give me opportunities to prove that I deserved the, I guess, respect that they wanted me to have.
Sure.
And I sometimes wonder, can a child learn that on their own if they are being 24/7 monitored?
No. See, I don't think so. I mean, it just, well, maybe they can. Again, I think it comes back to motivation. Why am I monitoring?
Yes.
And what am I doing with that information, right?
Sure.
I mean, much of anything in society revolves, or whether something is good or bad as far as information collecting has to do with what do we do with that information. Right?
Fair enough. Okay.
I mean, we collect lots of racial information through census, right?
True.
What do we do with that information? Determines whether that's really kind of a racist thing or not.
Uh-huh.
So it's a matter of, you collect this information. What are you doing with it? Are you using it to praise the kid? Is it just there for emergencies so that you can know where they're at?
Mm-hmm.
Are you genuinely concerned about the activities they're doing, and you're trying to address those over time? I mean, what are you doing with it? I mean, I think of, at one point I had my oldest daughter, and I looked at the phone records frequently, right? Because we had cell phones, I paid for them all.
Uh-huh.
So, when she's talking to somebody that I may not like at the time, right?
Uh-huh.
Then, I can look at the phone records and I can see how often she's talking to him. And, what I discovered was that's really invasive. Sure, I had the information. I could look at it and that was fine. But what was I doing with that information? Well, I was attacking her and her relationships, and she was an adult in college, right?
Okay.
She should be allowed to, talk with whoever she wants, even if I think it's not such a great relationship. So,
because if you interfere too much, you're going to push her into. But if you give her space, she may come to the realization that you came to, that person is, well.
And the bottom line, for the time being, I know that as a parent, right? So until kids are about 26 or so, whatever they do is probably going to affect me as well, right?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I'm still supporting to some extent my youngest. She's great. She's gotten so much more mature, but it's just so expensive out there, right?
Uh-huh.
So I mean, she's just not able to quite do it all herself yet. And I suppose we could go to welfare and all that kind of stuff, but that's not really helpful. So we help with that, but to some extent, those decisions are always. But at some point, they have to live with whatever they've done, and whatever life they've made for themselves, and that I'm gonna at some point I'm not going to be here. And they're still going to have to live on, and they're going to have to do that without me. So you gotta release people to live their life, and hopefully they do it right.
Well, and that's why.
And right may not be exactly the way you think it is.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So but if they're living and they're happy and all that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, my mother wasn't particularly happy that I got married to my wife just out of high school. I mean, we were engaged before I graduated, and we got married 6 months later. And we've been together married for 32 years. So she wasn't extremely happy about that. She wasn't very friendly about it for a long time. And we just visited her this last summer, and she goes, you guys seem really happy. And I think that's probably the first time she's ever said that to us. So, but that's the life we made for ourselves. Was it right according to my mother originally? No. Was it right for us? It was.
And that's where I think I come down with the idea, should you track your kid or not? I go less is more. And the older they get, the less you need to.
Yes, definitely agree with that.
Because, again, I'm going to stick with, you've got to learn to make decisions. You've got to learn if that was a good decision or a bad decision, and try and rectify any mistake you made as much on your own as possible. And you need the freedom, in my humble opinion, to be able to do so.
I think if you want to track your kid beyond high school,
Get their permission?
You need to get their permission, but you should also relinquish and allow them to see where you are.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and maybe that'll change your mind about how much you want to track them. But I have no problem with that, right? Like my daughter can see where I am. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm never anywhere that I'm not supposed to be. So.
Well, see, Sherry's made that comment about, well, why don't you let me track your phone? I go, why do you need to track my phone? Don't you believe me? I am where I am, and I have nothing to hide from you, but don't I have a right to privacy?
Sure.
And so
and so if you're not comfortable with it, then people shouldn't do it, right?
Well, yeah.
I have no issue with it for me, but certainly if I'm wanting to track my kid, or if I'm asking to track them,
yeah,
right. I mean, in my daughter's case, she turned it on. I didn't, So it's I expected it to be turned on while she was in high school, but after that was up to her. So I think that's gone well, and I got to tell you, it was many years after high school before I felt like I didn't need to track her, but I couldn't always see. So. It's just.
I can say that it was probably a good thing for my sisters, especially my sister Deanna, that this technology was not available back when she was in middle school and high school.
It's probably good for a lot of us. Of course, I lived in a small town, and most of the stuff that I did got found out anyways within 30 or 40 minutes. So, I mean, everybody knows everybody, we had our kids grow up in a small town in South Florida, and my son got pulled over one time, and the state trooper called his wife to ask if he should give the ticket, and his wife said no because we couldn't afford it. I mean, this was everybody knows, right? So we found out pretty quickly that my son got pulled over, which he readily admitted to, anyways. But people know people in this. So if you're in a small town, you might not even need the tracking, right? Like,
well, true.
You're going to find out anyway.
My dad worked for the phone company.
Yeah.
Back when you had a phone company, and those guys were all over town, and they would report to my dad. They were more efficient and effective than the police force at tracking us kids. And I think all the employees would track each other's kids and report, hey, I saw your kid today. Saw him at this place at this time. Oh, thanks. I hope they were doing something, But, it was.
So I think whether you track or not, I think motivation is there. Like, what's your motivation behind how you're going to use that data?
Yeah.
Just like, how are you going to use the data about their grades? How are you going to use the information from the assistant principal who called you today to say what your kid did? What are you going to do with that information? How are you going to respond to that? Does it even need a response? I mean, so it's just, are you using it to leverage over them something, or are you trying to help them become, a better person or learn something? And even how that plays out can be different. So I think my thing is, whether you do it or not, be careful.
I'll go with you on that. Totally. I mean, to quote, was it Hamlet? Instead of to be or not to be, it'll be to track or not to track.
Right.
So, well,
awesome.
All right. I don't have anything else. So.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to let you track me. So.
All right. Well, then we'll track to the end of today's episode.
All right.
Until next time, my name is Rod.
I'm Scott.
Bye.
Bye-bye.